Ty Brooks. Ty the Bourbon Guy.
Ty the Bourbon Guy.
Welcome back to the podcast, man.
I appreciate you having me back.
Of course, dude. We had to.
Family, bourbon.
Family and bourbon is what we're all about today.
Yeah.
I'll catch people up on what's up. So we're back in Indiana and near Indianapolis, where Andrew and I have been hanging out. And of course, I had to reach out so we could do another podcast.
Yep.
My second cousin, who we may never have known that was the fact,
Yeah.
but like we figured it out, and now it's hilarious. And I brought your second cousin and my first cousin Jordan Shaw here with me today.
Yep.
To come observe the podcast. And I tried to get her brother Jacob, but he's like busy doing college things, moving and stuff.
Priorities.
Yeah, priorities. That's all out of whack, man.
We're trying to have a family reunion.
That's
and
what we're
have
trying
the
to
whole
do.
thing, right?
That's what I was thinking.
I supply the bourbon. We're good. I got plenty of it.
I supply the nothing, but I'm a good drinker of the bourbon.
Right. There you go. That's all you got to be.
So,
Sure.
So we were just like, it's funny to like have these two things because I'm so used to like podcasting on one wavelength of like the things that I come in to talk about, and then there's also like all these family things. We're looking at family photos, and then we're talking about the UFC, which I'm thinking we should talk about because like it was wild. This last, I think it was 247.
Yep.
And if people didn't go see these fights, like there's one fight that is not worth watching at all, which was unfortunately the Rose Namajunas fight, which I don't know if you heard about this fight, but it was like on the main card. It was supposed to be a great fight. Thug Rose, defending her title, and it was terrible, dude. It was 5 rounds of, there were maybe like 10 significant strikes in the entire thing.
Yeah.
It was so sad. Like it was awful. We're all just sitting there like dying for anything to happen.
Yeah.
And she lost her belt over not fighting.
You and I, it's like you know more of the technical side of it. I'm just a fan of it, right? So just watching but we've watched it for years now, and when it's and I get you're trying to sell the pay-per-view with the some of these names, and you're looking at some of these fights, and you're like, man, I can't wait for so and so to fight so and so, and then they get in there, and for whatever reason, it just ends up not kind of, and you're like, huh, okay, well, there's $80,
Yeah, I know. That fight was a mess, dude. It was a mess. It was bad for both their careers. It was just nonsense. But there were some really good fights too. Like I'm sure everybody has seen at this point the photo of Tony Ferguson's face like scrunched because he's getting kicked with that kick straight up the center line to his chin. That man, I don't know how he survived some of the fights that he's had lately, but like he's still kicking.
Yeah.
But that looked
well. One of my buddies was like, "You couldn't pay me enough to have this photo of me circling,
Right.
around the internet," and I was like, "You could pay me enough.
Yeah.
You could pay me enough." For
No,
sure.
he still did okay. But man, that was sad to watch because everybody loved. I mean, he's great, obviously,
Right.
but it was just no contest. It was wild. And then of course Charles Oliveira, who I've been rooting for since I first found out about him because he's such a good representative of jiu-jitsu. He's crazy with his submissions. He's just a savage, and surrendered his belt because he didn't make weight, which seems sketchy from things I've heard about the scale.
Right.
It's just a real shame. But then of course he dominates Justin Gaethje, and I don't know, it was like a 45-second fight. I mean,
Right.
it was just done.
Yeah.
I like at the end he's always got his translator because he's speaking Portuguese, and all he's saying in that exit interview was just like, "Give me the belt back."
Right.
Like, it's obviously my belt. There's
Right.
no one that can even keep up. It's
Right.
just, I love watching him fight, man. I'm sad for him about the belt thing, but I feel like weirdly it's one of those things that can be good for a fighter's career because there's a lot more talk about it.
Right.
It's not so bad to have like the UFC to be the bad guys to this
Right.
to this guy,
Well, because it makes headlines. I mean, whether
Exactly.
it's a good, they always say no publicity is bad, or what is it?
No press is bad press.
There you go. So one of those deals of, because I had friends of mine that don't even follow UFC, but it popped up on their ESPN app or whatever, and as a headline, and that one guy lost his belt for his weight, so maybe, I don't know. It may not seem like it, but you get more eyeballs on you and start looking at stuff. But
it's not going to matter. Whoever they give him next and they say, "Oh, this is for the belt," he's going to destroy him again. That's what he does.
Yeah. More fuel to the fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm already going back on what I'm supposed to do on this podcast because normally I like have so much jiu-jitsu talk that I can't, that like I try to balance it with other topics every now and then for people. So we're not going to talk about fighting all day today, folks, but I just needed to touch on that because it was a great series of fights to watch. Like, it was really awesome. It was a good event other than the one fight, and it's a lot of fun. Like, if you very carefully pick which UFCs you're going to watch, like Oliveira is always one to watch.
Yeah.
He's just it's stellar. So, but what we're really here to do today is to like make it an early weekend.
Yeah.
Get a jump start.
Yeah, we're starting it
So
early.
we're ready. Pre-game for the weekend.
That's right. Set the mood.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you've already supplied Jordan, who's a Moscow Mule fan, with a Kentucky Mule.
A Kentucky Mule. Yep.
So what is that?
So, I've mainly, especially around here, that's most people call it Kentucky Mule, but I've also heard people call it a Bourbon Mule or something like that. So Moscow Mule uses vodka, and a Kentucky Mule would swap that for bourbon. So take the vodka out and put bourbon in, which I'm always a fan of.
And it's like ginger and lime. And
Yep. So it's bourbon, and for that particular cocktail, we used Old Forester 100 is what it's called. I've talked to a lot of bartenders that prefer that as their especially the closer you get to Kentucky, there's a lot of bartenders that are using that as what they use for cocktails because gonna nerd out a little bit, but that's what
we're here to do.
That's what we're here, yeah. But with bourbon, you have some bourbons that if they don't hold up to the cocktail, then you don't even taste the fact that there's bourbon in it. Some people prefer that, but then if something's overpowering the other ingredients, then you don't want it to be that strong either. So to find something that's right in the middle of the road and that's going to hold up to the cocktail but still give you that bourbon flavor, a lot of people prefer that as a cocktail or in a cocktail. But it's bourbon. I always use crushed ice. Doesn't really matter what ice you use, but bourbon, ginger beer, and lime juice. So freshly squeezed lime juice, and so anytime I'm going out and stuff like that, that's kind of, especially like during the summer when it's hot, it's been hot lately. I just think it's funny because, there's sometimes where people think that I'm just drinking 130 proof
right
bourbon all the time, when it's 100 degrees outside. And it's like, no, sometimes I want something refreshing.
Right.
And, I like an old fashioned, but I don't want that in the middle of a 100-degree day either. So the Kentucky Mule is kind of the way to go for me.
I like that because bourbon it's a little bit of a heavy kind of evening drink.
Yep.
It's not necessarily something you want when you're already out sweating and stuff, but there's ways to make it a bit more summery.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much this is coming through for podcast listeners, but I wanted to be on the porch so bad. We do have someone doing a little construction, but people have gone with me on this before. This has been okay.
We'll roll with it.
Usually it's like birds chirping, which is, I think, a little more pleasant to listen to.
Yeah.
I'll speak up a little bit so that the volume difference helps in the final editing, I think.
As they're watching this episode, they're drinking along with us. And
yeah, that's true.
They're not even paying attention to them.
Yeah, you're just on a porch, and someone's doing construction. What are you going to do?
Right.
That's summer. That's summer in Indiana.
It's all part of it.
So I had a recent podcast that I did here in Indiana with a hunter, Tiffany Compton, and she's a big cigar and whiskey person. And so she had me try some whiskeys. Andrew, can I see my phone really quick? Because she sent me which ones these were, and I wanted to remember them for you. And I see one of the brands already on the table. So let me see. She said we had a Beardstown bourbon. Here, I'll show you this. You can tell me.
Okay.
But the fun thing about that one was it tasted like
Bardstown Bourbon Company. Yep.
Bardstown, did I read it wrong? Oh, Bardstown, yeah.
Yep.
Dyslexic today.
And I've got a few of those sitting right here.
That one that she had straight up tasted like an old fashioned. I don't know what it was about it. It was super orangey. And then if you scroll one left, there was
Smoke Wagon.
Smoke Wagon. Okay.
Yeah, we also that's in the bunker, but it is available.
Yeah. You dig those?
Yeah.
These are good. She did me right.
So Smoke Wagon is in the first time we did the podcast, we talked about sourcing bourbon and how one of the companies that's the biggest for that is called MGP, that's located in Indiana. And so a company like Smoke Wagon, when you're trying to get started in the bourbon industry, you don't have time to sit on barrels and all that, right? So they went to MGP and, tried different barrels, bought barrels, whatever, and then brought them to, they're out of Vegas, and, aged them there and all that stuff. So Smoke Wagon lately, but same with Bardstown. They both do a tremendous job, in my opinion, of blending. So in the past, you could get barrels from MGP or from Indiana and put your label on it and make it seem like it's you, and nobody really knew the difference. Nobody really cared. So you may, when you're looking at a shelf, you may see different brands and it could all be the same stuff, but there's just not that transparency. Now with social media and the way the internet is and all that stuff, everybody wants to know everything, right?
Yeah.
And so these brands that are coming up, and Bardstown's done an amazing job. That's why I actually wanted to highlight them today. But where, yes, we get barrels from different places, but we're also making some of our own stuff. That stuff is still aging, and we're going to mix that in with the stuff we got from Indiana, from the stuff we got from Tennessee, from the stuff that we got from Canada, or whatever it may be, and we're going to blend it together. And I've really appreciated the blending of it, more so than just buying a barrel, slapping a label on it, and there you go. So I have learned that that some companies blend very well and some don't, but those are two great examples of companies that do blend very well.
That's cool. So, cool. Okay, yeah, it was a fun time. And if people missed that episode, and you like anything involving hunting or hunting dogs, which she has some amazing German short-haired pointers, I want to say, go listen to that episode, because it was really it was insightful. I don't mean to toot my own horn. I think I was asking her questions that led to some really insightful answers from her, and it was a fun talk. So go check that one out. And now we get to do another porch and bourbon episode. And dude, this is why I started the podcast. So I feel a little naked on this show without something in my hands. Yeah, should we get the tour? I guess
we got to pour it up.
Started. Let's do it. All right, where do you want to start?
All right. So last time after we finished the show, I realized that you'd always wanted to try Buffalo Trace.
Oh, yeah.
So
we should talk about that, too, because you were generous enough to send me with some bottles that I took with me. You sent me with a Jack Daniel's single barrel select, I think.
That's right, yep.
And I took that to a UFC night at the gym I was at in West Lafayette. Great guys. One of these dudes drank half of my bottle of whiskey, which was wild. But, more power to him. He got home safe, so whatever. But that paired well with that night. That was a lot of fun to take that. And the Buffalo Trace I was way more selfish with because I was excited about it. And we talked last time, too, about how, I'm sure we'll get into it again this time, but your perceptions of things affect whether or not you're going to like them. And I had a certain amount of buy-in for Buffalo Trace. They support podcasters that I love. And so I wanted to drink that and I wanted to enjoy it, and I really did.
Yeah. I think not only that, but also the memories you have with it.
Yeah.
So now the next time you see a Jack Daniel's single barrel sitting on the shelf, you're probably going to think about, man, that was a good time. And, and it's so funny because I've been with people and I've tried different whiskeys and so let's use your example there. So where you're out with them and you're drinking and you're like, man, this whiskey's amazing. And then you go home and you try it and you're like, I don't know. It's good. But to me, the environment, the feel of it, where you are, who's with you, all that stuff seems to matter. I kind of equate it to bourbon and food pair very well together to as comparisons. And when you're out at a restaurant and it's like, man, and you got family around you and it's just a great time, friends and all that stuff. And then you go home and you try to make the same thing and it's just like, I don't know. It's good. Right. Yeah. It's just you. It's just a different feel. Or maybe you get that same food, but carry out and just sitting at home eating it by yourself. It's just a little different. So,
right.
It's the same type of thing with bourbon.
Yeah. And I had that Buffalo Trace when we did your show, when I got to be on your show, and that was really fun. I remember that your internet cut out at the very beginning. Yeah. And I had your audience.
So you were the new host. I am your captain now.
That was fun. I like pressure like that. That's the weird thing, is I actually really enjoy Andrea is shaking her head because she would hate a moment like that, but I love it, dude.
Yeah.
Throw me in.
It's hey, we're rolling with it.
We're rolling.
Yeah.
Cool, man.
Yeah, so let's try with the Buffalo Trace. We'll start with that then, since we're...
Good warm-up. I like it. Yeah, I re-listened to our episode to make sure we don't necessarily go over a bunch of old ground or anything, which I always feel a responsibility to the podcast listeners to do.
Sure.
Because I don't want us to end up talking about all the same stuff, but I'll try to apply what I learned last time this time.
There you are.
Thank you much.
And of course, we had to
You got your
Bring out
branded glasses.
the actual merch, right?
Yeah. Yep. I like your logo a lot, man.
Thanks. So, your other cousin, my sister Jordan, is the one that actually designed that logo for me.
Oh,
She
nice.
is an artist.
Nice. Cheers, man.
Cheers.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for coming back. Thanks for having me on the show.
For the homies. Okay, now here's what I remember.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to smell it first.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And then you're supposed to kind of ignore the ethanol factor.
Yep. See if you can go past that. And one of the things that I do is, and it may look kind of weird, but I actually rotate my nose sometimes. So mainly because, especially this time here for me, one of my, maybe it's sinuses, I don't know, maybe it's some type of blockage or something like that to where I can't really pick up something, the smell.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes I'll just turn my head and see if I'm picking up more in one nostril than the other. But Buffalo Trace is just a solid bourbon overall. But
yeah, I like it. And again, I remember, don't judge it by your first sip, because
because that first sip just
it's
kind of
early in the day and it's just gonna hit.
Yep.
Just gonna warm you up.
Yep. So then once you take that second sip, and then once you go back to the nose, you should be able to pick up more.
It's so elitist. I love it.
Well, you got to put the pinky out, and then we're there. But
yeah, I think it's true that you need things to compare it to too, and that's that's one thing I remember from last time. It's like now in my head, okay, baseline, and I feel like with Buffalo Trace, in my experience, that is a good baseline. That's a solid bourbon, and it's not like heavily in any one direction to me.
Very quintessential bourbon. Like it's one of those things when you think about tasting notes for bourbon, you think vanilla, caramel. Some people say cherry. Some people say butterscotch. All these kind of different ones. This is pretty much all of those, I feel like. So it's just a very, very good baseline. It's a very good introduction to bourbon.
I'm really feel like I'm studying this time.
Yeah. Well, you know what to look for now.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. Whereas before, it's like, oh yeah, it's bourbon, cool.
Yeah.
But. So, the only thing that's kind of, because Buffalo Trace, it is very good, but you have a lot of people that recommend it, and then you have a lot of places in the country that actually can't find it. So, Indiana, luckily, has not really had that issue, at least around here, and you can still find it pretty easily. But I've gone to other places. I actually went, so here, there's another brand that's part of the Buffalo Trace family called Weller. It's also part of the Pappy Van Winkle. It's like, they're all tied together. But Weller here, I don't know that I've ever just seen it sitting on a shelf ever. And obviously I go hunting for bourbon.
You would know.
Right. And so I go to Dallas, this is a couple of years ago, and they have Weller just kind of sitting there. And then this guy comes in, and I'm just like blown away that they have Weller just sitting here. So I'm like, yeah, grab a bottle. and it's not marked up crazy or anything like that. $20 for a bottle. And I'm like, that's what it should be. And so I grab it, and then there's this guy who runs in, and he's asking the lady, do you have Buffalo Trace? And she's like, no, try again next month or whatever. And he's like, man, you guys never have it. And then he leaves, and I'm just thinking, man, I mean, so I kind of feel like the whole, I don't know, what you can't have type of thing, because here Buffalo Trace sits on the shelf, and nobody really, I don't say nobody, people still buy it, but it's not that, have to have it. Whereas Weller probably is more of that way here, but if you travel in other places, it could be flipped. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, so the person who's working at that liquor store didn't try to help steer him in the right direction with something else or anything?
She just let him walk out the door. But that also blows my mind because, I think especially with, I don't know. There's so many whiskeys out there now. And I think it might have been, there's a whiskey company called New Riff Whiskey. And I talked with some of their founders. And I was because they're relatively new. They've been around now for, I think, 6 years. And so, I just kind of said that I know people say, oh, I remember the days where I used to walk in and Buffalo Trace was just sitting on the shelf and nobody wanted it. And I understand that, but I also love the fact that this many people are into bourbon because it's brought so many new companies and so many new players to the game. And Bardstown being one of them, that, okay, now we have to get creative and we're going to blend and we're going to make bourbon first and blend it first. And then we're going to put it in a wine barrel and we're going to see how that tastes. And then we're going to put it in a beer barrel and we're going to see how that tastes. So to me, the creativity that's come out of it is what's amazing. So now there's all different types of bourbons and different things I can do, or they can do to increase the quality of that product.
Right.
But
yeah, is it the more attention that gets paid to a certain industry, usually the better for it. And we talked about this last time too. Big fan of competition. Think that the more we have, and when something benefits one of us, it tends to benefit many of us. So, I think Buffalo Trace, I respect their business prowess. I think they developed a brand that people get. There's something that they've capturing the buffalo, that's an interesting thing to a certain set of people. That's like you're either you may be fascinated by that, like the outdoorsy crowd. And then, they obviously went all out on advertising on newer forms of media, including podcasts. And I don't even just mean Rogan, because there's a lot of other podcasts of other comedians and stuff. Even I know Jordan listens to some of the podcasts of some comedians that get Buffalo Trace sponsorships. And so because they did that gets someone into bourbon. That person ends up finding and liking other bourbons if they have a good store associate that doesn't let them walk out the door. And
Well, and that's what I think it's really neat. So my suggestion is always to me, because what made me really fall in love with bourbon is it's the actual category of bourbon is the history. So when I was in college, I was always the bourbon guy, which we covered last time. But I've always been into bourbon, but it wasn't until I actually went to the Buffalo Trace distillery, and there's a guy that works there who's really well known in the bourbon industry, and he takes you around the distillery, the campus there really is what it is. And so he's a third generation worker for that distillery. So his dad and his grandfather both worked there. So the knowledge that he has is just amazing. And so, he's telling us the history of it, and, how his grandfather used to pull these barrels and, take this to this politician, all these different things.
That's cool.
And kind of show them their product and show them the process. I don't know, man. I fell in love with that part of it. And so, but being there and then trying the different products. But one of the things I think is really funny with Buffalo Trace is that the actual Buffalo Trace bourbon didn't used to exist. The distillery existed before. So you had Buffalo Trace Distillery that distilled other brands.
Oh, okay.
And then people would show up and say, well, where's Buffalo Trace bourbon? And they say, well, there is no actual Buffalo Trace bourbon.
Yeah, I think you were telling me this last time about some other company that it was like, you start as kind of a distributor, and then it's like, why don't we brand it and this is ours?
Make our own. Yeah. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
I was thinking of some historical connections here. I've got an interesting one for you. So Andrea and I were in Texas hog hunting. We didn't get a hog, which was
unfortunate. You said it so casually too. Just
what?
We were in Texas hog hunting.
Is that not casual? It's about the easiest type of hunting you can do because they give you a rifle in about half an hour, which is awesome.
Yeah, it just sounds awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it was great. It was great. I bought a bunch of guns there because I was like, thank you, Texas. This is cool. Go in, got our rifle, walked out. And we were trying to do some bow hunting too, but we ended up, we just couldn't get the hogs to come onto this property that we were on. They were like over property lines. We tried baiting. We did so many things. And we were there for 3 weeks just working our asses off and nothing. But at the end of that, our bait stations were getting really hit up by raccoons, a lot. And these are not your neighborhood trash pandas. I've said this on this show before. These are country raccoons. They have an interesting and varied diet, and they're not eating trash and garbage. So we decided to hunt a raccoon, and I just went out, and it's a really easy animal to hunt, frankly, because you've got a bait station, you take a .22, and we got a raccoon, and yes, we did eat it too, which people might turn their noses up at, but like they've never had raccoon when you cook it well, a real raccoon. So screw you. And I mean, I made a hat too, which I should have worn today. Now I'm thinking about it. Anyway, so here's the connection that I'm going for. What I thought was really cool is at the same time that I was doing this, I was reading George Washington's biography, and he turned out I think he enjoyed coon hunting and brought some of the first coon hounds into the United States. So he was part of making that a real thing, and now they bred coonhounds forever. That's a big part of breeding. If anybody read Where the Red Fern Grows, those were coonhounds, and a lot of that book is about training those dogs up to do that. But George Washington also at Mount Vernon had one of the largest distilleries in the country at the time, which I thought of you as soon as I heard about that, because you wouldn't anticipate Washington. He wasn't much of a drinker. He drank some, but or any of the founding fathers with that, because I think we think about whiskey as being just a little later in history, but it's not. No. And the fact was, Andrea looked it up for him. It was like 14,000 barrels or something from his 11,000 barrels from his distillery in the year 1799. Yeah, memories on par while I just started drinking, so that's helpful. And so I thought of you, and I was like, this is kind of a cool connection, man.
So last time you were here, we tried Elijah Craig Bourbon, and on the front of that label, it says 1789, and it says Elijah Craig is the father of bourbon, or whatever they. And the thing about bourbon and probably any marketing anything is they love a good story. Yeah. So nobody actually knows where bourbon came from, but there are some stories that kind of hold. But Elijah Craig was a preacher that the story goes that they had fish barrels or something like that, and he would torch the inside of those barrels to get them to get the fish smell out of it, and then they would store this whiskey. But at that time, it's because I think I said this before, whiskey is clear going into the barrel.
Right.
It's when it comes out that it turns this color. So that's kind of, but of course a brand got hold of that, and then it's like, oh, let's call it Elijah Craig. But regardless of that, 1789, that brand hasn't been around since 1789, but that was kind of like that story. And so every time I see that bottle, I always think like, man, like it dates back a long time ago. But so that's really awesome though.
That's cool. And if people like founding father stuff, Andrew and I also watched the BBC miniseries they did on John Adams with Paul Giamatti. That is like completely worth watching. It's really awesome. Really good. But yeah, I just thought that was cool. I like these historical connections. I can't imagine if you can get all of the fish taste out of the alcohol. But like, what would you do with a time machine? Like, I feel like, have you seen those memes about like girls with time machines, boys with time machines? You familiar with this at all?
I haven't seen it.
It's just always like, I don't know if the meme is always like girls would go back and like talk to their grandmother or something, and guys would go back. And one of them that I saw recently was like, guys would go back and tell Charles Oliveira the scale's off by half a pound. Don't get on it. Whatever. But I think like, how fascinating would it be to go back and try some of that seriously early American bourbon, some of the first stuff ever made?
Yeah.
Is that where you would go in your time machine?
Oh man, I think it'd be awesome. I mean, and so really the story that I probably think makes more sense is for whiskey to go into a barrel, and again, they put it in clear, they put it in a barrel, and then they send it down the Mississippi River, and it would go down to Louisiana and New Orleans, and obviously Bourbon Street's down there and all that stuff. And so the whiskey, that because of how long it took to get down there, the whiskey is actually aging in that barrel on the way down, and then they try it there, and they come back to Kentucky and say, give me some of that, basically what I had on Bourbon Street or whatever, right? So give me some of that bourbon. And so that's a story that's kind of held up, and I think to me that probably makes the most sense.
It does. I mean,
as to where that all came from.
Yeah. What's the history of words? What's the study of like words? Etymology? Is that it? Yeah, because like what is the etymology of it being called bourbon? Because that's a super French word. Mm-hmm. So would that have been the reason that it's referred to in that way?
So there's that logic, and then there's Bourbon County, where they made it. So to me, it's like, I don't know. That probably makes the most sense out of any of it than as to, and I understand. I mean, you had crops that you had to do something with, okay, we can turn corn into whiskey, and then we can store it in these barrels till whenever we can get to it.
It lasts forever. It doesn't make us sick when we drink it, unlike water.
Right. Yeah. And the thing that's Kentucky will always remind you of if you ever do the Bourbon Trail is that at one point, especially during Prohibition, you had whiskey was prescribed or could be prescribed to you. So that was also medicine. It's not like I could just take Tylenol or, whatever it may be, whatever medication. People would that's actually where the mint julep comes from. Began as a breakfast drink.
Okay.
So in the morning, which is I don't know. It's funny to hear it now in today's world, but in the morning you'd wake up, make a mint julep, but obviously jobs could be a lot more labor intensive back then, and their bodies are aching and things like that. But,
right.
So there was a lot of prescriptions for whiskey during the Prohibition.
Well, it's like if you like listening to stoners talk about stuff, that is one of the more interesting points they do make is it's true which things turned out to be medicine and which things turned out to be recreational, and it is a weird line. But yeah, I mean, it's super medicinal.
Yep.
Alcohol in general, and I think honestly, if you treat it like that, it's a lot smarter of a way to go about it.
Yeah.
In the same way that you're like, I'm going to take this Tylenol, but I'm not going to take that every day. That would be a bad idea. It might be a better way to consider your alcohol as well, and it's going to have side effects.
Yeah.
And if you have too much of it, you got really bad side effects. You end up in the hospital. But I don't know.
We kind of talked. Oh, hello.
Outside podcast.
Yeah. We talked briefly last time about just the perception of social media, and I realized after now having a little bit of a presence on social media how it is very true how people look at what you're posting and think, oh, this is your life. So if I post a different bottle of bourbon every day, there have been people that ask me how do you drink a bottle of bourbon every day? And I'm like, I don't.
You should tell them you do.
Right,
you should be I drain the bottle every night.
I did that before noon. But it just hit me of, man, people really think that I'm drinking a bottle of bourbon every day, rather than just, no, I just took several different photos and I'm just posting them every day. But
right.
That kind of, I try to explain that and try to show people that and it's funny because even with my collection, I know my wife says she gets that all the time where people are like, man, does he drink every day or does and this and that, and she's like, no, he rarely ever drinks actually, because really what we just did. So I don't know what my collection's up to now. Probably somewhere between 250. I don't think I'm at 300 yet bottles.
Wow. Somewhere
in that range. So for me, I've gotten to a point where I want to maybe compare Buffalo Trace to a Bardstown, and maybe I'll pour the amount we just had in two different glasses and smell them and taste them and see what the differences are. Or maybe, there's man, I haven't had a Woodford Reserve in a long time. How did that taste and what notes? And I want to just try a little sample when I drink bourbon, I pretty much drink it like that. And there are times where a Friday night or if my wife and I are hanging out or something, sure, I'll pour a glass or a couple glasses or whatever it may be. Yeah. But for the most part, it's not really that way. But again, the perception of social media is as if I'm down in a bottle every day. But
yeah, it's funny.
But yeah.
Well, yeah, I like that we're making the historical connections today. Maybe we should have another one before I go deeper into history.
Yeah, well, this would be the perfect time to now try Michter's American whiskey.
Okay.
Right? I mean,
sounds good.
History, right?
1753. Wow. Yeah. Or so they say, right?
Right. I'm just trying to make a connection for any reason to open this bottle up.
Perfect.
But, so this actually is not a bourbon, technically. This is an American whiskey.
I'm so impressed with how you balanced that glass on your leg just now.
I make a lot of people nervous, and
I was getting nervous.
I do it all the time, so it's
your glass, it's yours to do with. But it definitely made me nervous.
So, thank you.
Very moderate on these pours because I know it's about going the distance. This is a marathon, not a sprint.
So there's a few things. So what I always tell people is there's legal definitions and then there's actual definitions. So I think Jack Daniel's is the perfect spot for this because Jack Daniel's there's nowhere on that label that you'll see it listed as a bourbon. So legally it's not a bourbon. but it actually is. I mean, so if Jack Daniel's applied for, and we talked about this, like you said, I don't want to cover it too much, but if they did all the right paperwork, they could be considered a bourbon and slap that on the label.
Mm-hmm.
But there's all these requirements that are part of that. And so if one of the requirements is you have to use a new oak barrel or new charred oak barrel.
Right.
Container, I guess, is the actual verbiage. So if you use a barrel that's already been used for something else, you can't call it bourbon. You now have to call it something else. So you can call it American whiskey, or you can call it whatever else. So there's when you see American whiskey, it could be pretty much bourbon, but maybe there's something in their process that they adjusted slightly. Bourbon has to be 51% corn at least. Let's say there's 50% corn in this, so now they can't call it a bourbon. They got to call it a whiskey. So it gets very confusing, but I just tell people to drink it and tell me what it what it tastes. If you like it.
Okay, well, I'm open to it.
Yeah.
It's all right. I don't judge by names. Bye, Camille. Good to see you. Take care.
So
Very different.
yeah, and that's where I like trying, just comparing, because
Yeah.
it helps me identify more notes in the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And so right away, it's not as spicy as the Buffalo Trace was to me.
I feel the opposite.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I think you're probably right in the objective sense, but I feel the opposite. I feel it's far spicier. I'm getting like spiced fruit.
Okay.
That's all but spicy in a way that's like not like cinnamon, but like hot sauce almost.
Hmm.
Yeah.
When I always tell people, because people always ask me like, well, what is the right answer? And it's like, there's no right answer.
Mm-hmm.
It's whatever.
I like it. It's strong.
Yeah. Yeah. So this one, I don't know. It's we didn't go in a totally different direction, but we definitely went in a different direction, if that makes sense. So we're gonna go in a totally different direction when we get to these ones, but that particular one. That's funny you said hot sauce. I don't know that I've ever thought of that, but I could definitely see what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, because it lasts too.
Mm-hmm.
I take a drink of it and I'm still tasting it. My tongue's still kind of numb as if I've had a hot wing.
Yeah. But that's why, I mean, again, people always ask me what's the right answer. But especially somebody that doesn't know some of the more common tasting notes. I love hearing those descriptions because I would have never thought of that. But
You make me feel special.
Yeah, there you go.
It's
but that's
fun.
what it is, yeah.
I like doing this. It's a lot of fun to come and do a taster. And I hope that, I'm certain that this part of the podcast, like the 30 seconds where we're sampling something, someone's like, let's move the fuck along. But like, listening to you talk about what you're tasting for might inform somebody else about like what things they could be tasting for as they drink their bourbon. Yep. And for me, it's just, I'm representing the amateur's point of view, but you've yet to give me a bourbon that I don't like, although frankly, I think that'd be really challenging. I just like whiskey.
Yeah.
I'm still like whiskey loyal. That's still my one drink. I don't keep anything else in the house.
Yeah.
Well,
that's why it was funny because
that's all I bother with.
For me, I mean, there's a lot of alcohols that I probably will never touch again. Just I've ruined them for myself.
Rum is mine. Yeah.
And the two that I made it out of college and my younger life, and I was okay.
Yeah.
Is whiskey and tequila, and I think that's such a odd pair to.
No, I get that. I get that. It depends what kind of tequila you've had. I've had some really good tequila that's just like, it's just like you're drinking smoke. It's like so, I don't know, like kind of, it's like smoked almonds. It's just like really intense, cool flavors.
Tequila and bourbon to me, or whiskey in general, they just seem natural to me, if that makes any sense. Whereas like rum, just certain ones they taste artificial to me. But that's just my own taste buds.
I get what you mean.
And it's just like, for some reason, those two stick out really well for me. But
I bet in their purest forms, each alcohol would be worth like drinking.
Right.
But I don't know if we can always afford or have access to their purest forms.
Right.
Like I didn't know tequila was good until I had a neighbor who gave me some and he was like, this is the real stuff. And it was so good.
Yep.
But I've never had really good vodka.
Right.
And I hear that if you have really good vodka, you're like, whoa, this is different entirely than the cheap stuff I bought in college.
Right.
I
think whiskey can be that way. I mean, there's a lot of people. So a lot of people know the brand Evan Williams. and Evan Williams makes a lot of different products. And so when people are getting into it, there's certain Evan Williams bottles that I recommend. And everybody always tells me, like, no, I'm not going for that again. Like, I had Evan Williams in college. And
Right, sure.
And I'm like, the black label you had is different from, and same with Jack Daniels. I get that a lot too with Jack. The bottle that I gave you last time is an amazing bottle, but people see Jack Daniels and they're like, no, I don't like Jack.
Yeah, it was different.
Yeah, and I'm like, try this one.
It was different. My budget bourbon, the standard is that Evan Williams from Sam's Club, the black.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
I'm like, this is fine because
Yep.
I usually mix it up with something
Yeah.
else anyway.
And when you're mixing it, there's a lot of, and that's where, I mean, for me, you know, I always ask people, how do you drink it? Because if you drink it like neat, like we're doing now, and you want it to see what type of flavors and this and that you have going on, then I can steer you in a better direction. But if you're just like, I just throw it in Coke, and then I'm not going to put you down the path to go spend $100 on a bottle.
Yeah.
But
I started really liking it in like in LaCroix, you know, just sparkling water with like different flavors. Like that'd be my summer cocktail. It's just like a cold lemon LaCroix.
Right.
Dump that in with some whiskey, and I think we did a podcast episode in Tucson where I was literally pouring whiskey straight into the can. Like I'd open up a can, take a few sips, pour it in, cool, go.
Yeah, see, and I would prefer that over, because they have the RTDs, the ready to drink, where they'll take like a Kentucky Mule, like what I made earlier, and can it. But and some people love it, you know. But I there's very few that I've had that I just think, you know, I don't know. I'd rather just pour it in a can myself.
Yeah.
And you know, because, and I get it, you're trying to make to duplicate this process, but put it in a can, and I'm sure there's a lot of limitations. But for me, for my preferences, it's like,
well, that's what we talked about yesterday. We talked about cooking a little bit and how I have to know everything that's going in for me, and so like I buy the product that has the least in it, which like you get a LaCroix, it's sparkling water, and they add usually like an oil from whatever flavor it is.
Right.
It's some type of natural essence, and then so I'm like, okay, that's already really simple, and then I'm putting some bourbon into that.
Yeah.
Great. I know everything that's in that. I'm comfortable with all of it. I feel good. And it's hard to get a hangover from a mixed drink that is, you know, 90% water.
Right.
So that helps
For sure.
too as
For
I
sure.
get older. I'm getting older, man. I had a birthday here recently, just before we came here, and I'm like, this is coming. I'm getting old.
Well, for me, like I said, now I've got the little one running around,
You do.
and what my friends don't understand is, you know, oh, you got a babysitter, or, you know, your wife's got him. It's like, yeah, but either way, he's going to wake up at 6:30 in the morning and remind me that he's going to wake up at 6:30 in the morning.
For real.
So, you know, so to me, that's like a whole different deal there. But it's a little bit different than my younger days.
Yeah, I get it.
So being not hungover is very important to me.
This one's interesting. I won't say it's my favorite of the ones I've tried.
Yep. Because
I feel like it's just a little, I don't know.
Do you feel like it lacks the depth
Yeah.
that the Buffalo Trace does?
Yeah.
Yep.
The spice overpowers me. Andrea's staring at me. What's going on? Oh, okay. You're making faces at me. What am I supposed to do? Not look at you? So
She said it, and then you proved your
podcast
point.
listeners can't hear you at all, but it's my fault is the long story short. It's my fault. I'm sorry. I can't help but look at you. God damn.
Yeah. There you go. I gotta write that one down.
That's my excuse. Yeah, but it's cool to have something that's so unique to compare anything else to. But I feel like what I feel like I'm getting is more like I don't know, maybe it's like too sweet almost, weirdly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so there's I will say there's other whiskeys. There's a brand called Four Roses. Four Roses is a brand that a lot of people really enjoy. I met maybe a few people that didn't like it, but people love it. And then, but there's so many times if it's in a blind flight where you don't know what you're trying, but you're trying different ones, where people maybe mark that as the last option. And then they're surprised when they go back and see. But it's a lot of people believe that it's not because that's not a good whiskey, but having it after the whiskey I just had now changed that flavor profile totally. Or having it and then trying this other one. But if I were to pour that by itself and just enjoy that on a Friday night, it'd be great.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of whiskeys that are like that, where I think you have to kind of just take into effect or take into account, I guess, all what you ate. Did you just brush your teeth? Did you, and food could be the same way.
Yeah.
If you try something after you've had something else, you're just like, I don't know, that didn't taste that good, right?
Right. And I think, and it goes even deeper than that to get into some of like my more weird stuff. Like, as Andrea and I, we talked about this last time, we were just phasing into like carnivore diet type stuff. She's gone further, and now this girl ate literally nothing but lamb meat for 3 weeks-ish, a month-ish, and now she's like slowly phasing things back in. And she talks about how she can taste everything so much more. And I feel like the more I've cut out and gotten simpler in what I eat, I can taste things more. And something that is sweet is incredibly sweet now, So there's also like a reset. There's a baseline of each person. It's like, well, like how much sugar do you generally eat? That's going to go into how intensely you're going to taste everything, or how do you put spicy food, like do you put Tabasco on everything that you eat? So it's funny, every single person is going to have their own story when it comes to that.
For sure. Yeah. And like I said, the comparison, because you need something to compare it to. So if all you're eating is lamb meat and then you go eat a piece of cake, it's like, man, this is like
you're
a sugar shot,
planet.
right? Yeah. But if you were just eating cupcakes every day and then you go eat cake, then it's like, okay.
Exactly.
Right? So it's like that comparison. So for me, whiskey's the same way, because if I'm drinking bourbon itself is a great example, because bourbon itself is sweeter than a Scotch or an Irish whiskey typically. So because of the corn. So if I'm drinking bourbon and I go from bourbon to bourbon to bourbon, and people are telling me it's sweet, it's like, no, I don't know. I don't see it. I don't taste it. But if I go drink a Scotch and then I come back to bourbon, it's like, oh, this is way sweet.
Right.
So comparing, that's why I always say, like, try different things and try them together and see. Then you'll start to pick up what everybody else is saying or whatever.
Yeah. I think that's the other thing, is it takes time.
Yeah.
Like you've got the longevity in this, because you've been doing this since college. You've been doing this for years. So you've had the patience to build, like, trying something, coming back to something like a year later. You change, taste change. So you have to have the time for it.
Even as a bottle is opened. So this one in particular. So, kind of like wine, that whiskey is going to air out a little bit. So versus when I just opened it. So when I freshly open up this bottle and cork it and try it, I may get a whole. There's been whiskeys that I've had where I open them up, pour it, just go for it, and I'm like, this is some of the best whiskey I've ever had. I'm gonna buy 3 bottles of it, and then I go put it on a shelf. And it's sitting like maybe this far down, and I go back a year later and I try it, and I'm like, I mean, it's good, but it's not what I remember.
Do you keep a big spreadsheet of that?
I don't. I actually tried to one time.
I was thinking,
the accountant in me would for sure do this, but I did start one, and then it got to be, it's just like I have too many bottles and too much to, because and lately, content wise, I haven't really been doing as much with all the bouncing, being a dad, but it gets to be a lot when you're trying to do. Okay, I reviewed that one. I tasted that one. This is what I got for this one, and I did this one on my podcast, or it's like way too much to try to keep track of on a spreadsheet. So now I just have more fun with it, where I just go down to my basement, look at the bar, and just see. Yeah, I haven't had that one in a long time. I'll just try that, and that'll be good. So.
Yeah, well, I think you talked about that. You talked about how, like, we talked about hobbies a little bit last time.
Yeah,
just how someone should have one. And how beneficial that is, and that you do this for the love of it. And so be as organized or disorganized as you want. You don't have to file a report with somebody about this.
That's
and
right.
You owe nothing to your followers. Like, it's great that they're listening, but like at the end of the day, this is about what you want to do.
Yeah.
Just enjoying yourself.
And I always say I have enough hobbies for anybody. So if anybody wants to borrow any of mine, I'm sure my wife would be like, yeah, take them. Although she benefits from, because I like to barbecue and smoke different meats. And, I tried to get it going today, but it's the whole meat shortage thing.
No, that's good. I actually would have felt weird if you had, because like it's weird for me to come over and just like drink someone's drinks, and like at Tiffany's I'm like smoking her cigars and drinking her drinks. I'm like, what am I bringing to the table here? I never know what to offer. And I didn't, and my sourdough's not even going. I was like, oh, I could bring a loaf. I don't even really have it going right now. I just woke it back up, and so I have nothing to offer. So I'm actually really glad you didn't. I thought about bringing some steaks over that we could like just sear up and go with, but it seemed a little complicated. You know?
So I've got plenty of hobbies, but I mean, for me, that's just how. So I kind of said in my professional life, I'm an accountant, and we'll see what other people think. But to me, accounting is super boring. I think I'm good at it, but it's like it's not necessarily my passion, or I understand it, but it's not my passion. But so for me, it sounds like, to me, I always feel like it sounds weird, but maybe it'll resonate with other people. When I go and I pay attention to bourbon and I study that, and that's an interest of mine. And then I go, my wife laughs at me because I'll sit on YouTube for like ever and just watch how this guy cooks pork and how this guy cooks chicken and how he makes steak and how she makes ribs. And I don't know. I watch all these different techniques and then I go try it, and then I try different ways. And I feel like doing those things, when I go back to the office, I'm like reset almost.
Yeah.
To where I can think clearly. And my wife laughs at me because it's like she knows me well enough to know that I have to have those resets. So the past few weeks, work-wise, can be, have been stressful, and I haven't had those resets. And so today's going to be a great reset.
Nice.
But, but I feel I get frustrated within my work because I feel like I can't focus almost unless I go, So, and the great thing about people that I've worked with is they understand that about me, and I love that they allow me to be me, and they just go do whatever you need to do. And so I'm like, okay, I'll go smoke some ribs, and then and I come back and I'm like, oh yeah, the answer is this and this.
Yeah.
So
that's cool. It must have something to do with the nature of the work too, I imagine.
Yeah.
That's one thing I like about my job is that we're always doing something different. Mm-hmm. So week to week, I'm on something entirely different. This week, I've been hiring people all week. That's been like the big focus of my job. The week before, Andrew and I were doing a content session. We were filming with our new client here in Indianapolis. The week before that, it was more like client management. So like I get to shift around a lot, but I gotta bet when you're knee deep in the numbers that it feels like there's not enough variance here.
And I think the creativity side of it. I mean, accounting is, you're not very creative. There's things that you can be, I guess, but they are what they are, right? Mm-hmm. And so
you're searching for facts,
right?
More than creating something.
Yep. And so for me, I use the creative side of my brain when I'm, like maybe we can smoke meat this way, or maybe we can. What if I use this seasoning with that seasoning, or different things like that, and it helps me kind of use the other side of my brain a little bit, and then I can go back to the other one. So,
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's cool. I love that. I am feeling this.
Feeling good?
I always feel nervous. Podcast listeners, I hope you don't mind when I start slurring and it just falls apart a little bit. Because I'm doing this for you. This is a sacrifice.
Right. I don't even really want to drink bourbon today, but but for the listener and the viewer.
Yeah, this is for you guys. So you're welcome.
Yeah.
Is the main point. Should we go somewhere next?
We should. So do you prefer, or do you like red wine or beer or anything like that?
I don't know how much you want to know, really. I do like beer. I like a good stout, like a Guinness is like a family tradition.
You couldn't have said any more, but that's perfect.
That's perfect?
That's
yeah.
perfect.
I used to honestly enjoy wine, but only the cheap shit. And so I think that was mostly just to get drunk quickly.
Yeah.
I started getting headaches from wine. I can't drink it anymore. I'll get a massive headache if I start drinking red wine, which kind of sucks. But yeah, I mostly just don't drink beer because it just doesn't make me feel all that good. But right. I mean, a Guinness with the right meal, I'm in.
Okay, so I know where we're going.
All right, perfect.
So, Bardstown Bourbon Company, they have done different collaborations, to where they source some of their whiskey. And that's where I said they get it from different places. Tennessee, Kentucky. Lately, they've gone to Canada and gotten some whiskey. And then they make their own. So they have a lot of different types of whiskey coming in to play with. And so one of the things that I think is awesome about what they're doing is while their product is aging, they have been able to partner with several different brands and say, okay, you make beer. So this particular bottle, they've partnered with Founders Brewing, based out of Michigan.
Yeah. Why does Founders so familiar? Andrea, is that, we must have had that when we were in Michigan, weren't we? Yeah.
So this is actually the beer itself. So it's called KBS is the name of the beer. It's a flavored stout. Just says ale brewed with chocolate and coffee, aged in oak bourbon barrels.
Yeah, so that would be a beer I would buy.
Right.
Like, that is a description that
And that's why when you were saying that, I was like, oh yeah, we're going in the right
Cool.
direction. So I think it's really neat what Bardstown is doing, because this is a stout aged in oak bourbon barrels. Okay, we've had a couple. This is the third one.
Yeah, I know. I'm feeling
reading's hard.
No
I'm
problem.
a numbers guy. But then they take the whiskey, and then after they have the whiskey that's barreled, they then say, okay, let's give us the barrels that you used with this,
Right.
and we'll put the bourbon back into that barrel.
So would that make it not technically bourbon then, because it's not a first use?
So the way the government actually handles this is you can say bourbon, but you have to put that it's finished. So I don't know if anybody's going to be able to actually see this, but it says straight bourbon whiskey finished in Founders KBS aged stout barrels.
Whoa. I mean, is this an endless cycle? Like, can we go back and make more beer?
Right, yeah, they go make more beer. So the thing about that is they're not putting that on there so that I know that. They're putting that on there because they legally have to put that on there. So it is a straight bourbon. That's what it starts out as. But then we took that and we put it in stout barrels provided to us from KBS, or from Founders KBS Brewing. So they put the little KBS logo on the back. So they've done this now with several. They've done cognac. They've done red wine. They've done beer. They've done all different types of things. And so I got a chance to try this. And I was actually, I don't want to hype it up too much because we're going to see.
You already have, dude. I'm actually really, really excited about this.
So this is a pretty pricey whiskey, but I think that, so a lot of Bardstown products, I will say, most of their products are over $100. Some are well over $100, but the quality that you get in that, I don't know. For me, I'd rather do that, and maybe that means I don't buy as many whiskeys. But I'm going to really enjoy this bottle. I'm going to share it with family and different people, right? And then, I don't know, that makes that bottle special to me. That's rather cool. than maybe get 3 other bottles that were $30 a piece or something like that, right? So, but I will.
Please do.
Yeah.
You've hyped this up too much now because I'm really excited about this.
Yeah. So
I didn't realize it could go the other way. I mean, I would always want to buy a beer if it was like, hey, aged in bourbon barrels. I'm like, all right, I'm going to like that. I didn't realize it could go the other way at all.
And to be honest, what I've learned about whiskey that I really like is because I'm the same way. I love Guinness. I love stouts. I love porters. So I have realized that whiskey, that kind of carries over. So when I'm drinking whiskey, some of the best whiskeys I've ever had, in my opinion, have some type of chocolate note to them, some type of coffee note to them. You know, there's just certain characteristics that are common between a stout or a porter and certain whiskeys. So
okay, all right, I'm excited.
So I think especially knowing that where it comes from or what it was aged in, I think you can definitely pick that up.
Dude, that is like a chocolate bomb in a way to me. First one.
Yep. So this one's a little higher proof than what we've been drinking.
Yeah.
So
that's for sure.
This is 110 proof, 55% alcohol.
So I like that you've told me now, like, kind of get over the burn first.
Yep.
Because your tongue gets a little numb to that burn, and so does your nose, and then you can kind of go back in and really see what's up.
Yep. Yeah, because if you base it on that, it's going to be tough no matter what, just because of the alcohol percentage. So
this is extremely chocolatey to me.
Mm-hmm. See, I actually got more chocolate after I always do, man. After I take that first sip and I go back, I get more.
That's fantastic. That is really fantastic. It's crazy strong.
Yep.
But
so this would be to me like if you I just got this bottle not too long ago. But if I were making dinner or even eating dinner, whatever the case is, with that proof, this would be one I could drink it neat, but I would love probably to throw an ice ball in there or something like that, and just because sometimes I don't like when you're higher proof. This is why a lot of people like higher proof whiskeys. They feel like it's almost like eating a steak more on the rare side. They feel like they can get more flavor out of it. If you cook it well done, maybe you're not getting the right flavor or whatever. That's the theory. So whiskey, people think the higher the proof, the more flavor I can get, which makes sense on the chemistry side because it's not as watered down.
Right.
So sometimes if you put ice into something, it takes out what makes it good, if that makes sense, and then you just taste bourbon. It takes out the depth of it. But something to me like this that has so much going on, if I put ice in it, it may drown out the heavy ethanol notes, and now it might enhance the chocolate and the coffee and all that stuff. So
I don't think it needs it to me because I'm just getting straight coffee, chocolate.
Yeah.
That like really good bitter thing. That's super unique.
Yep. So to me, and I actually just posted this the other day on my Instagram page, but and I actually tagged Bardstown in it. But I didn't just say this for the posts. I really believe that this is one of the better collaborations that they've ever done.
Yeah.
It just pairs very well together. So
that's really good. Oh shit. I just thought of something I should have bought you, which is we had this barbecue sauce in Kansas City that you would have loved to try. It was like similar to this. It was a collaboration between a barbecue sauce maker and a local brewer, and it was this, IPA based barbecue sauce. And you look at the ingredients, and the first one is literally the IPA.
Was it Boulevard Brewing? Maybe.
Was that it? Yeah, it was like really heavy.
I used to live in Kansas City, so
okay.
Yeah, I know Boulevard does a lot up there. So
it was really unique too. It's like they sell it in a beer can, and you literally pop the top of the beer can and everything. Awesome. It was really good. Does that sound right, Boulevard? Okay, that was what we put on our raccoon barbecue.
That's awesome.
Which really complimented it. Say what's that, Andrew? Say what, right?
Oops.
Oh yeah, raccoon barbecue, which we decided is barbacoon. That's how many drinks well, actually, it's not that many drinks. It's early in the day. I don't have a lot of food in me. So this is working. It's magic. Yeah. That's my favorite time to drink.
We got to go find some raccoons and then throw them on the smoker here.
Yeah, but see, we'd have to go miles into the country to do what I'm talking about.
Way different raccoons.
Yeah, different. I mean, I think that'd still be fine. Dude, it's an interesting meat. I was worried to like talk about it really. But, whatever anybody wants to think about it, that's fine.
Yeah.
I didn't expect that I would want to
try it.
Yeah,
right?
it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. I saved a leg. I saved 2 legs to make for my dad when we go up to West Lafayette because I want to be like, try this.
Yeah.
You will not know that this isn't just pork.
Yeah.
It's super good.
That's actually, it reminds me. So I used to live, at one point we lived in Okinawa, Japan. And I remember we had this, there was a family there off the base that, it was when I was a kid, so I can't really remember. I think it might have been like once a month we would go there, and we would cook traditional American dishes, and they would cook some of their Japanese dishes. That's and cool. Then we would kind of just. And I remember I can't remember the guy's name even, but I remember the guy, because even going to seeing a traditional Japanese house, and you see certain things in movies and things like that, but to see it in person and to see like no, they really sit down.
You're sitting on the floor,
and
yeah,
and it's just like, to me, it was like a lot of even, and probably the military helps with that, but the respect of it, the respect of their traditions, and again, military is very tradition, focused and things like that. So even as kids, we understood to respect their culture and things like that, and the differences. But food was always one of the things that was like, as a kid, it's like, I don't know, just give me a cheeseburger or something,
Right.
And I remember this guy saying he wanted me to try this, and he goes, we just made fried chicken. And then I'm like, okay, I like chicken, and I eat it, and he's like, it's eel. And so, but I didn't know. I thought it was chicken.
Yep.
So
that's pretty common in the world of hunting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think I could do it. There's an ethical piece of me that I don't think I could serve someone something unless they were open to me saying, I'm not telling you what this is.
Right.
Just try it.
That would be me. It's like,
That'd
I'll try
fine.
anything. Just don't ever tell me what it is.
I couldn't be like, oh, here's a chicken. And, I just couldn't do that personally. But, oh, wow. School bus time. There we go. That's what that is, folks. But yeah, I mean, it is true. Like, I've now had squirrel and I've had raccoon, and those are things I never thought I'd eat in my life. I might have thought maybe I'd eat a duck at some point. We've eaten duck now, wild duck that we shot in Florida, but certainly not raccoon and squirrel. And you know what? They're pretty good.
Yeah.
And then you think like, you're kind of joking around about the meat shortage, and it's like, what exactly do people think they're going to eat if they're wasn't a grocery store stocked with food.
Yeah.
Where would you go? What would you be able to do? And it's weird to learn about the history of it. Like the Great Depression, raccoon became a massively eaten food because they're super widely available and they're really easy to hunt.
Yeah.
We had a few opossums in Texas too, and I considered that. It was too far over the line for me. It was a little challenging, but then as you read about it, that whole international thing in Australia, they eat them all the time. They love them. So because we're here, we go, gross.
Right.
They eat them a lot. I don't know.
Yep.
So you don't really know what's right. I feel like that insight about you being you said it was in Japan. Yeah, obviously.
Yep.
Sorry,
Okinawa.
drinking.
Yep.
Okinawa. That I feel like that helps me understand you weirdly a little more.
Yeah.
Because that like a formative experience of someone being like, food is respected and sacred and all these things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and the thing about it is Okinawa, the island, was an amazing island. We were over there when I was about 12, 13. And so, and my mom now left, but I used to give her a hard time because as an adult, I gave her a hard time about being a kid because we were on a base. So I would walk up or take my little scooter or whatever to the naval hospital where there was a shuttle. There's a bus there and it would drive you through different military bases. And I'd go to another base and I'd walk around the exchange there, the PX or whatever. And I don't know what I was doing as a kid, looking at toys. I don't know what I was doing, but hanging out with buddies of mine, whatever. Or we'd leave the base and we'd go to the beach and we could walk there, or we'd go to the mall, the Japanese malls there. But Okinawa itself was so safe that their crime rates are extremely low. And, they actually have, one of the things I thought was the coolest is, and I don't know if it's still a thing, I would imagine it is, but so if a kid was trying to cross a highway or really any road, and they would stand on the side of the road and they're trying to cross, all they have to do is put their hand up and vehicles will stop all the way so the kid can go all the way across the highway.
Wow.
So that was really cool that, there's just a certain level of respect and tradition there that, again, it just pairs well with the military, I guess.
Yeah.
So, but
I'm so challenged by that concept because like on the one hand, I always want to like tear down any semblance of culture because I feel like traditions and things that are done without a really solid reason are
just because
bad.
we've always done it. Yep.
Yeah, and I'm not into that. I like the progress of like we have to have good reasons to do things.
Yep.
And at the same time, sometimes that results in people just taking advantage of that openness to just be an asshole.
Yep.
When the real thing is you don't need a culture to tell you why you should not be an asshole.
Right.
Like, don't be an asshole.
Right.
And then we don't have to have all the cultural reasons to do it because then you get, I mean, this is actually, okay, here's another connection. I wrote it down on my list. I can't believe I'm remembering this tipsy. And I wrote down James Bond on my list of things today because I just finished reading all of Ian Fleming's James Bonds. And the man loved to drink his bourbon. Everybody thinks of James Bond with his shaken, not stirred cocktail or his martinis, right? But bourbon is like what he's almost always drinking for himself, which I thought was really cool. I thought you'd like that.
Yeah.
So James Bond is a bourbon man.
Yep.
And the new James Bond, The No Time to Die, it's actually fucking awesome.
Yeah,
so,
I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, it's good, man.
Yeah.
Rami Malek is good. And it's based off of, I think it's not Dr. No. It's, oh shit, which one is it? It's the one with the poison garden and all that stuff. I just read it. I don't know. I don't remember which Bond it is. If I was sober, I would. It's one of the later ones. Anyway, it's good. Fuck, I lost the connection. Holy shit.
Bourbon.
James
Bond likes
James
bourbon.
Bond, Japan. Fuck, where were we right
He was
before
drinking
that?
bourbon in Japan, and then and then he raised his hand and he crossed the street. We're talking about traditions,
cultures. Yes, thank you. Thank God. Okay, cool. So
I felt like I was playing like
Oh my
charades,
God.
like I'm just throwing out.
usually that's my fucking job. On this podcast, people use their train of thought. Usually it's my job. This is how much bourbon we've had. So in one of those later books, the one with the poison garden, which is in No Time to Die, he's in Japan and he's trying to infiltrate this secret compound of this suicide garden. And it's one of those things culturally where this book really explores like how the Japanese consider suicide as an okay thing to do, as a like very sometimes honorable thing to do.
Right.
And that's one of those things culturally that I've got an issue with.
Right. Sure.
You know, what's your? It's you only live twice. Thank you. It's after Blofeld kills James Bond's wife on their honeymoon. These books have been out for 60-ish years.
If you haven't read it yet, then
yeah, you're never going to read it probably. Yeah, that was one of my favorite books because this whole garden is gross, but it's like it's romanticized. People
Right.
He builds this Blofeld, who's the bad guy. I think he's the German dude in the new Bonds, right? The one that's in charge of Spectre. What's that actor's name? Christoph Waltz. Yeah, that's who Blofeld is in the movies, and obviously the books are like kind of everybody's like an amalgam of a character from the book. But this guy builds this poison garden in Japan full of these plants that will kill you, and rivers that are full of piranhas, or ponds that are full of piranhas, and snakes that are all over the place. And it's a romantic idea for the Japanese. They will sneak into this garden and commit suicide by, they'll go in with their lover and they'll eat a fruit, and they don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
But at some point they die, or they fall into like a geyser. Like there's a million horrible ways to die in here.
Right.
And so I feel like that's one of those things where culturally I'm so torn. Like we've created such assholes by throwing off culture.
Right.
At the same time, culture has some deadly side effects to it.
Yeah, for sure. Doing things without logic.
Yeah, exactly.
The funny thing is that part of me, it's the accounting part of me that actually is with that the most, because, there's, with technology and things changing, there are a lot of different things that can change with it, and processes and things like that in my professional life that you go in, and it's funny because you can go into a company and they see your experience or they see what you're good at, and they're like, oh man, what ideas, tell us what should we do? And then you list all these things out, and it's like, well, no, that's not how we do it, And so for me, people don't have to go with my idea just because it's my idea.
Right.
That's not what frustrates me. But regardless of whether it's work or personal life or anything, if you just tell me something and there's no logic behind it or reason why we're doing it, you're just, that's the part for me that's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't. But if you have a logical, like, here's why, this, and this, then I'm like, okay, that makes sense. So
that's why I don't have very many friends, because I never liked people. Like I don't make plans with people because they'll be like, let's go here first. And I'm like, why? That's in the opposite direction.
Exactly.
I'm not fucking going to do that.
That's exactly how I am. Yeah. So,
yeah.
But, yeah. So we actually, I was going to bring it up with you. The timing of it is really cool, but because we do the podcast today. So Monday, I'm actually going to, so I mentioned last time how I partner with the liquor store here up the street.
Right.
So Monday we are going to Kentucky to actually do what they call a barrel pick.
Yeah.
So the Jack Daniel's bottle we sent you back with last time was a barrel pick itself. So we're actually going to go to Maker's Mark. So I'm really excited about it. But so to go there, to be able to go to the warehouse, and this is actually my first one. I mean, I've seen them and I know how they go, but to actually be the person that's, so what they'll typically probably do is ahead of time pull out maybe 6 barrels out of their warehouse or something like that and let you try. Sometimes they even drill a little hole in the barrel and, okay, hold the glass up, try it, and you'll try 6 different of these barrels, and it's like, you're comparing these ones, and you kind of think, okay, this is the way to go. Then they bottle that, so you probably get maybe a little bit over 200 bottles out of that, depending on how it is. And then they'll bottle it and they'll send it back to that liquor store to then sell. So
that's cool.
So yeah, so we might have to do another episode down the road.
Dude, that's awesome.
But yeah, so I'm really excited about that, man. That's probably the next big thing in bourbon that I'm doing. Well, it has to be the next big thing because it's Monday. But yeah, I'm really excited about that.
Dude, that is really cool. So you'll have a voice in that decision of of what's interesting and why. And
yeah.
I feel like it's all in presentation too. Do you get to pass your comments on to the eventual buyer? Like, do you get to be a part of?
Yeah. So I know, to my knowledge, I know there's a lot with liquor laws and all that stuff of, it's like my input, but and there'll be other people there too, so they're going to give their input as well. But it's going to put that liquor store's name is going to be on it. It's not like my name's on it or anything like that. But from there, and that's where social media is great, is that I don't have to wait for that liquor store to ask me for my comments on it, or anything like that. I can post my own thing and say, this is what I thought about that bottle when I tasted it out of the barrel. This is how I feel like it came out in the bottle, things like that. So, but yeah, I'm really excited about it.
That is cool. That is cool.
So that'll be Monday.
Can I come?
Yeah.
I'm not qualified, but that would be fun.
I'm just inviting people to.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, whatever. Just come on.
Hey, this is my cousin. Can he just roll with us?
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna show up and be like, look, man, I had a few, and then
they might respect you more for that.
Yeah.
They might be like,
they're like, yeah, whatever. Come on, let's go.
I gets it.
Yeah,
that is really, really cool, man.
Yeah,
and you'll probably get the kind of the red carpet treatment from Maker's Mark. Really, I bet this is a process where really
right, yeah, because it's just different. And like I said, I've seen a lot of people put these, they document it, put it on YouTube and things like that. And I've heard people talk to me about it, but yeah, I mean, when you book a tour and they kind of tell you the basic stuff, and you walk around the distillery and all that stuff. I know Maker's Mark is really cool because they have red wax on the top of the bottles, and when you go there, you actually are able to dip your own bottle into the wax.
That's really
a
cool
big thing that people love to do. So they have basic things on a regular tour that you can do and all that stuff, but. To kind of go behind the scenes and, okay, yeah, the tour's over there, but you guys come over here. We've got your barrels pulled over here. So I'm really excited for that.
That is really cool.
So,
yeah, I mean, there's nothing, as former Coloradans, there's nothing like a brewery tour. It's really fun to get behind the scenes and see what's up and have someone who knows what's happening tell you about what they're doing there. That was always one of the most fun things to go do. It's a special process, and it's usually the only people on the tour, besides a few spouses that may get dragged along or kids that may get dragged along, are really excited about the entire process.
Mm-hmm.
It's rare to find things that are that kind of communal, that people are not just interested in the product, but take me on a tour of how you make this.
Right.
I can't necessarily think of another industry besides alcohol where that really happens. Am I crazy? I mean, outside of maybe entertainment, maybe like Disney, if they do behind the scenes
seeing
different stuff, right?
Seeing different sets.
Sure. Yeah, Hollywood
and all that stuff. Yeah, maybe.
But it's pretty rare to have people be that excited and that passionate, want to go back and you go on a brewery tour and they're like, who knows the 4 ingredients of beer?
Right.
And then someone raises their hand because they're so excited to say oh, it's water and yeast, and I don't know.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Colorado. So last time we were in Denver, my wife and I, because my brother-in-law lives in Denver, and they have a distillery out there called Law's Distillery. And
I haven't heard of that.
Yeah. Well, we have some bottles that once we're wrapping up here.
Oh, cool. Okay.
But anyway,
I get so spoiled by this guy. You guys, Ty the Bourbon guy is the coolest person to know and to be related to. I'm really stoked about it. All right, but go ahead.
So we went out there, and they actually have, I think they called it Whiskey Church or Bourbon Church or something like that. But so you walk in the distillery, and to the left, there's it's like a little chapel almost. And you sit down in pews, and they actually had questions where they were asking. If a whiskey is a 4-grain whiskey, what is the 4th grain? What are the typical 3 grains in a whiskey? How long does a whiskey have to age? They're asking all these questions, and I'm just sitting there, and my wife is just elbowing me the whole time, just be quiet, just don't, because I'm over there oh, pick me, let me raise my hand,
Yeah.
And she's like, no, let other people have their moment, but no, that was the last time, and that was a really cool. That distillery itself is not that big, but just seeing what they were doing, and then I got a chance. It was really cool because they have their traditional. They let me try their bourbon. They let me try their rye, and then after that, we just started talking. I told them about what I do and all that stuff. They broke out here's this, here's that, try this, and we walked out of there with 5 or 6 different bottles, and it was funny because I brought because you can only check, you can bring alcohol back on a checked bag. So I brought a bag specifically to check back with alcohol.
Beautiful.
So, as anybody named the Bourbon Guy should do.
Yeah.
But
it's a business expense, like we talked about.
Yeah, exactly. We'll write it off. And so, but yeah, so to pack everything up and to come back with all that stuff, it was just awesome. But the experience I had, but that was a small distillery. I was talking to maybe 2 or 3 people that worked there. And it was just awesome. That was a great time. And so you don't need to go to a Buffalo Trace necessarily to have that great experience. If you have a local distillery near you or anything like that, go for it. Try it out.
I feel like that's a good message, probably to end it on this episode is just getting involved. I feel like you are such a great example of someone who got involved because this was a passion of yours. You dove into a hobby. you decided that the pathway for you was to also make content about it, which that's not required for people who want to be excited about this, but was the right fit for you. And because you had those connections, now you're on your way to like being a part of the decision-making process of purchasing straight from these distillers.
Yep.
I mean, that is super cool. It's a great example.
Yeah, pretty awesome.
Yeah.
For sure.
Did I get to everything on my brainstorm list, Andrea? She's trying. She's avoiding.
She's like James Bond. And
Oh, that was the only other historical interesting thing lately. So I started reading biographies mostly because I just started doing that, and I was like, why do I like biographies more than reading history? And I read a great article by someone who was talking about when we read a biography, it's the story of a person, and then you have the story of how they interact with someone.
The story almost, yeah.
And so you remember all these connections much better because we're wired to remember those connections better. And so I've gotten really into just various biographies. The one I'm reading now is about Rockefeller, which is really interesting because at the time there's such a huge teetotaler temperance movement. And I thought one of the craziest things about it is you have like the Women's Christian Temperance Union. I think that's the name of the organization that would go into bars and interrupt people drinking and like be like crying and praying and all these things just at the bar. Yeah. Like how wild that would be to see today. Yeah. Like if someone were to walk into just like your neighborhood bar and start crying like, please stop drinking. You'd be like, this is nuts. Yep. But I guess historically that was just what was happening. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. There's actually, there's a brand called Few Spirits. And shout out to Few. They've been on my show a few times, and the things that they're doing are really unique and really amazing, but they're based out of, and I don't want to mess this up because I always confuse it between Evansville, Indiana, but I think it's Evanston, Illinois.
Okay. That's a town in Illinois, right? Yeah.
It's got it.
Jordan says yes.
I'm pretty sure that it's Evanston because I always think that, but then I always think I get confused with Evansville, Indiana. So, and then we've had a few.
Yeah.
But yeah, but there was a lot. That's a very historical town for during the Prohibition era. And so now that's where that distillery is based out of. And we won't get into all the details, but Few is FEW, which happened to be the initials of a particular person in history that was trying to, that was very for Prohibition.
Oh, really?
So it's kind of funny to connect all the dots.
Yeah.
But either way, Few has done a lot of things. A lot of whiskey brands, pretty much everybody else cuts their whiskey down or proofs it down with water. They proof it down with cold brew coffee. There's another one that they proof down with Immortal tea. So they do a lot of different things that are pretty unique. And Paul is the owner, master distiller, everything over there. And he's been on my show several times, and he's an awesome guy. So
that's cool.
If you're ever going that way, I would definitely put you in contact with him. He's a great guy to talk to. But he actually started out as a musician and decided he wanted to get in the whiskey world. So
very cool. Okay.
But anyway, so
yeah.
But yeah, it's very neat to see history and how things were back then, how people thought back then, and then kind of see where we're at now.
Yeah.
And kind of go from there. So
nice. I love that. I feel like we took this to an entirely different realm this time.
Yeah.
Which is really cool. I love that. I don't think we should be done hanging, but I'm really worried for myself that I'm about to become a shit podcast host because this whiskey is just kicking in hard.
Yeah.
People, I don't think they can come at me for that. This is some really high proof stuff, and I have nothing in my stomach today. So, I wonder.
But if you weren't that way and you visit Ty the Bourbon Guy, it's like, I mean,
yeah.
Like I said, how much of a bourbon guy am I if you're not feeling good?
Yeah, so. If he can't get you intoxicated, who can?
Right.
You need to go to a meeting if you can't get you intoxicated, frankly. No, dude, this was great. But I think my brain is just about to flip out of podcast mode and just into hang mode, and that's not good. I really attempt to take what I do with podcasting like really seriously and try to make something super entertaining for people, and I also recognize like when I am about to just fade out. So what can we do? So I'll have your socials and everything on there, but remind people where they can go to find you.
Yeah. So lately, like I said, got a little son now, and he is very much almost a 2-year-old. So lately, the only social media that I've actually been interacting on is Instagram. So you can find me on there, Ty the Bourbon Guy, TYTHEBO Bourbon Guy. So I'm on there. Feel free to send a direct message or anything like that if you ever have any questions about whiskey or bourbon. I get them all the time, and I love that. I mean, that's something to me. It's a passion of mine, and I love to see where people are in their own journeys and kind of help them along, find maybe that next bottle that they enjoy. You know, hey, I like this. What do you recommend based on that?
Nice.
So absolutely find me on Instagram. And that's probably the main place I'm at.
Yeah, he's not bluffing people either. Like some of the things you'll ask me things like, what do you prefer with this, and then you just nail it, and it's so exciting every time. So, I think my main point is like I'm glad we're family. Like I'm glad I have such a good excuse to make you a regular on this podcast, man.
It's awesome.
It's great. It's been a fun year-ish. Andrew's saying less than a year. It's been a little less than a year. But I'm glad to be back in Indiana and do another episode with you. And I consider you a regular stop when we come out to the Midwest because it's a must-do to come and have some bourbon with you, man.
Absolutely. I appreciate you stopping through, and it's been a great time.
This is the easiest thing I've had to do all week. This is the best part of my week. So we will have a few photos, as always, on Instagram at @THicksonLife. I think Andrea has schemes to have a little Strangers Meeting video episode about this on YouTube, so that will be on the Wild Hickson's YouTube. I'm not sure what she's going to put together, but I trust her, and at this point, I can't help her anymore because I don't have the capacity to work now. So she is
just take the content from here on it, from before,
exactly.
And here past, then let's just cut it. Right?
I carried the baton, and now it's your turn to make something great. So there'll be a little video, and I know you guys have seen those. Like we do a few Strangers Worth Meeting videos here and there. It's kind of replaced like our vloggy thing we used to do. And so now it's just like when I have a great guest and we have some interesting things that like visually it's fun to show people, that becomes kind of the new place to do it. So that's always on the Wild Hickson's channel. Anything else to lately upcoming to show off? I don't think so. That's what we had going on. What are you saying? Oh, yeah, Andrea is working on the next Wild Hickson's on the Hunt. I don't know what you mean by forever. I thought you were color editing. Aren't you like...
Yeah, but I have been for like 2 weeks.
Okay, she's in the color editing process, which if you don't know is basically one of the last steps to perfectionism. So there will be an On the Hunt episode from Texas of that raccoon hunt and what we did with the raccoon, which is fun. Well, really hog hunt that turned raccoon hunt. But hey, that's how the Wild Hicksons go. All right, I think that's it, man. Thank you so much. We're going to hang for a bit. It's just we're going to shut you guys off. So sorry about that.
Come to Indy and you guys can hang too.
That's true. That's true. Ask him for any of your bourbon questions.
That's right.
Thanks for listening, folks. We appreciate you a lot. And as always, we will see you on the next episode.
Cheers.